Go ahead. Okay. Welcome to Inspire, Innovate, and Ignite, Conversations That Count. Our conversation tonight is the power of no, setting healthy boundaries. And I'm just going to give me a second. Here we go. This is the Women's Empowerment Program, and where we get inspired by expert panelists who share innovative self-empowerment tips which will enrich your life. Each intimate group of panelists has been hand-chosen for specific topics to ignite deep conversation amongst guests who join live. Showing up live is the very best way to not only learn from experts, but to engage in discussions and get your very own questions answered. This series will help you understand the topics at a deeper level so that you become empowered to integrate the tips and discussion elements into your day-to-day life. Again, our conversation for tonight is the power of no, setting and keeping healthy boundaries. Society places a huge emphasis on sacrificing our own needs for others. Praise is often bound up with agreeing with other people being nice or making an effort. We're programmed to please others, and that's not easy to overcome until we learn to say no. We will continue to be overwhelmed with too much to do, not enough time. Learning to say no more often means giving yourself time and freedom to be and do what matters to you. So let's explore the best and the most effective techniques to say no without feeling guilty or selfish, so that you can focus on your own priorities and use your time and energy most wisely. I'd love to introduce our panelists tonight, and if you'll just bear with me, here we go. We've got Jen Rossner. Jen is a conscious law of attraction trainer and teacher of the foundational principles of conscious creation, and would love you to join her to learn how to implement these key principles so you can consciously create a life that you love. You see, success isn't personal to Jen, it's structural. We have Madhurima Sapati. I hope I said that correctly. Madhurima is a freedom soul coach. Her aim is to guide coaches to go from being burnt out to thriving. The intention in the end is to create a sustainable space that will help coaches grow, expand, and experience freedom. She brings together her inner work, burnout, and spirituality to enable as many people as possible. Welcome, Madhurima. And finally, we have Dr. Trina Hinckley. Dr. Trina is an internationally recognized award-winning PhD expert in behavioral change. Her work has helped people around the world to transform their lives for the better and to keep them that way. These days, Trina works with the 3 pillars of Western evidence: Eastern spirituality and Indigenous Earth connection. Trina's focus is on providing her clients with the support they need to work through the processes of change and transformation to their becoming. She is currently also working on the Little Book of Change. I'm sure it's not that little. A book which captures and documents the journey of change and transformation, whether it is chosen or imposed, resolved or ongoing. So we are about to get started. And I just wanted to say that in my experience, saying no is a whole sentence all in one word. I was getting some nods from our panelists. Saying no is a whole sentence in one word. So I'm going to ask our wonderful panelists what your personal most important boundary, the one boundary that changed your life the most. So Jen, could we start with you? You are a conscious law of attraction expert. Yes. What would you say? Yeah, what would you say is your personal most important boundary, the one that changed your life the most?
Understanding structure and understanding that you're not broken and that there is a system to success and a formula for success and a formula for creating. And if you step into that and you don't take things personally, and through meditation and other things, but mostly just the fact that there's a structure for success, and that's been the main thing. And understanding that I create everything, I create my life.
Okay, so the boundary that changed your life the most, you're saying it is being structural, correct?
Yeah, well, it's understanding that it's structural and not allowing myself to take things personal. And so when I start focusing on other things, setting the boundary like, okay, I need to refocus back on what's true. And the truth is I create everything. I am a conscious creator. I'm a prominent creative force in my life. And so it's setting that boundary that even when I unfocus, it's refocusing back to that thing. And that's the most important thing, is that understanding for me.
Thank you. That is very enlightening. I appreciate that. Madhurima, you coach coaches to avoid burnout. What's your most important boundary?
I feel like for me, the boundary between, let's talk from a general perspective, yeah. The boundary between work and life is something that is really, really huge, because I feel like a lot of people speak about the boundaries that you need to have for resting, but there also needs to be proper boundaries for your work life. So when you have those clear boundaries in place, you can easily flow between both of these scenarios and experience freedom at its highest, right? And I feel like just diving a bit deeper into it is the fact that a lot of people think that creating boundaries or creating limitations is the worst way to experience freedom, when in reality, the more clearer boundaries you have around your work life and your personal life, the better you experience freedom at its highest potential. So yeah, I feel like just understanding where to draw the line for the work life and where to draw the line for the rest or the personal life is something that really shifted a lot of gears and a lot of things for me.
More balance, more harmony?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thank you. That's something very important for, I think, all of our listeners and our watchers to really think about for themselves as well. Boundaries between life and between our personal lives and our work lives.
Yeah.
Trina, your turn. You are an expert in behavioral change. That must have given you a very different perspective when it comes to setting boundaries.
Yeah, I guess it has, Sue. And I think the thing that's really helped inform my boundaries and my ability to say no is really honoring my own values and looking after my dignity and putting boundaries around the behaviors that I'm prepared to accept or not accept, depending on how they impact on my values. So for instance, recently, for some reason, I've had a couple of instances where people have started pushing me or nudging me to act out of integrity. And integrity is one of my highest values. And it's just felt really uncomfortable. And when I felt into that, I've got, that is crossing a boundary for me. I'm not prepared to compromise my integrity. And so then I'm able to say, no, that's not okay for me.
I think that's something that's very, very, very important for most people to recognize. And I think that a lot of times boundaries really do encompass, and they should encompass, where our integrity is being pushed or perhaps quantified for us, really. So thank you for sharing that. We've got some beautiful places to start. Descriptions of who says no. So I kind of put together a list and speak to any which one of them that you like. And if I could, I'd like to just kind of give that list in brief, or at least the first couple of them. The people pleaser will find it really difficult to say no without an apology or a long-winded explanation. The controller will say no, emphasizing how you deserve the no or brought it on yourself, right? The healer might say no with a manifestation message, right? The teacher will say no with a learning story to support why no is the right answer at this time. The narcissist will say no by making the choice of no your fault. It's your fault if you don't say no, or if you do say no, rather. The child will say no out of petulance, anger, or a need to control their own power. Okay. And the adult will say no because they might need to say no to keep you safe. So I'm going to just give that list again, and you can speak to whichever one appeals to you. The people pleaser, the controller, the healer, the teacher, the narcissist, the child, and the adult. These people will all say no in different ways and for different reasons. So who would like to start? Go ahead, Madhurima.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue, for this amazing list. And, you said earlier in the introduction that sometimes saying no in and of itself is enough, right? And I feel like as a recovering people pleaser, I have always added a huge bundle of reasons behind why I'm saying no. Because first of all, saying no, how can I, how dare I say no to something when my friends came up to me and requested for help? And I feel like as a coach and as someone who's always been in a very empathetic place, I always feel the difficulty to say no, because I know how hard it is to actually have the courage to come up and ask for help, right? And I've always looked at people when they've asked for help from that perspective. And so for a pretty long time, I was like, no, and this, XYZ reasons. And it sounds like, at that point of time, you are trying to pacify the person in front of you who's asked for help or who's asked you to do something, right? You're like, this is not about you, this is about me. But when in reality, it is about neither of those things. It's neither about that person, it's neither about you. It's about a boundary that you have created to safeguard both your emotions and their emotions. So it's both of them and none of them kind of a scenario, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's almost like I mean, if you are doing something when you know from the depths of your soul that you don't want to do this right now, you'll do it without integrity, which is one thing that Trina was speaking about. You will do it without integrity, you would do it without emotion, and it wouldn't benefit either of you, right? So I feel like as a recovering people pleaser, I have always had no and XYZ reasons, and I'm just learning to say no, being like, hey, I can't do this right now, but I would love to help you at another point of time. So instead of adding a reason, if you give someone that concept that we can reach out at a later point of time when I'm in a better place, or even just saying no for the sake of saying no, like, I don't want to do this right now. I'm sorry, I apologize, but I'm sure that there are a lot of other people who can help you out right now who are in a better state of mind. I have learned to say that instead of giving a bucket load of reasons. Like, oh, it's not about me. I mean, it's not about you, it's about me, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying that, I'm just like, not right now, at a later point of time, or just saying no. Yeah, I feel like that brings an end to what I was saying. Yeah.
And I'm sure it frees up a whole lot more time in your schedule that you can spend with your family after work. That work-life balance that we were talking about before as well.
For sure.
Thank you. That people pleaser part is going to speak to so many of our listeners. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for jump right in on that one. Who's next?
I'm happy to go next. I think I'm like Madhurima, that I've pretty much been a people pleaser for a very long time, but I would be really honest and say that I've probably also said no from all of those other personas as well. And I think that we all have all of those personas in us. And certainly I've experienced those personas, external to me, saying no or not saying no, and what that's like to be on the receiving end. And I think like Madhurima, I've kind of got to a place where I just go, no, that's not okay for me, or no, I can't do that now, and just left it at that. And there isn't really very often a call for further explanation or, further inquiry or further conversation from the person who's asking you to do something. That just, I think it's almost kind of a shock for some people to have just a plain blunt no, because we're all so good at doing that. Or saying, maybe in 5 months, then I might be up, whatever that conversation is, that we're good at trying to provide those explanations or soften the blow, so to speak. But I'm finding more and more that just saying, no, that's not okay for me, or no, that crosses a boundary, is often really well accepted by people.
Yes, I think you're right. On my view, I seem to have lost Madhurima. And Sophia's nodding her head. Yes, we have lost her. Okay, I'm sure she'll be back on. I also find the same thing. I have been the child who out of petulance says, no, 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 I don't want to do that. But at the same time, I realized as an adult, maybe the wiser choice would actually have been to say yes. So it was the child in me that put up this boundary and said, no, 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 because maybe I was afraid, or maybe I just felt too overwhelmed or too whatever. I think we're coming to you, Jen. Which one do you want?
Well, I like both of Trina and Madi, I'm definitely people pleaser, also controller, and the petulant child, the stubborn child, obstinate, child. And what I've learned about myself is that when I'm really operating from those personality types, it's kind of like I'm saying no to resolve an issue. Like I'm saying no because maybe one of my self-sabotaging patterns is popping up. Like I'm afraid I'm going to get rejected. I'm afraid I'm not going to belong, or I'm not good enough, or, people will think badly of me. And so I feel like there's an obligation to say no. And then it's like the other part of me comes in and says, wait a minute, you don't want to do this. And so then I find another way to say no in a I can't even think of the word, but basically passive aggressive way. Where I'll say yes, but then in the last minute I'll flake, or I'll do all these things. But that's because I'm coming from a place of I'm trying to resolve this wound. I'm not coming from this powerful creator. Like I'm creating my life, and the values of the person who creates her life is, whatever, like you talked about, Trina, is integrity. What's integrity with me and what's important to me. And it's okay to say no. And it's okay if someone doesn't like me.
Yes.
And it's okay if they don't like me in the moment. And I'm not necessarily going to be rejected. And I'm not going to lose love if I say no. And so it's understanding, where am I coming from in this moment? Am I coming from the conscious creative perspective of I'm loved already, I don't need to say yes to get someone's love or to be safe or do all these things? Or am I coming from this smaller perspective and trying to resolve this thing from my sabotaging patterns?
And that brings us to my next question. Jen, that was perfect. Thank you very much. You brought up a few important pieces of being afraid of being rejected, afraid of losing love, afraid of not having love, or not being good enough. These are all such important pieces when it comes to deciding to set that boundary of no, I can't do this, or no, I choose not to do this. So I guess my next question would be is, how assertive do we need to be to set clear boundaries? How assertive do we need to be to set clear boundaries?
I think that's a really great question, Sue.
And you start.
For me, the answer is as assertive as you need to be with the person involved. And some people you'll need to be more assertive, and some people will be really easy for them to accept your no. So I think it's really a case-by-case basis, the context, the situation, and the person involved, and maybe the issue involved as well, what it is you're saying no to. I think if it's something that you've always said yes to, or a person that you've always said yes to, and then all of a sudden you turn around and go no, they're going to go, hang on a minute, what's going on? Well, of course you shouldn't say no because you've never said no. And why are you saying no? And they're really going to push you. But if it's somebody, perhaps in more of a professional environment or a different context, maybe somebody who doesn't know you as well, that might be easier. And I think for me, that professional piece has always been easier to say no than in the personal space. So, one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is start practicing somewhere that it's easy, because then you're going to get a few runs on the board and you're going to be able to do it, say your no, more easily in those places that are a little bit more challenging, and that you need to be more assertive because you have more confidence to do that.
That's so true. When I'm coaching my own clients, quite often, and they start setting those boundaries, I always warn them, you are going to get pushback from the people in your life, maybe not from the people at work, but from your personal people. And just be prepared that for a little while, it might get uncomfortable. But if you persist, they will eventually learn. It's a learning opportunity. And eventually they'll see the benefit because you'll be a happier person and they'll end up being more responsible for themselves. So, Madhurima, I see you nodding your head. I know you've got something to
Yeah.
add.
I do. I love that point a lot, Trina. And, especially the fact that if you do it in a place where it's much easier, you are basically creating the proof for your nervous system to recognize that, oh, this means that I can continue to do this, right? Like our nervous system works on the fact that it's called programming and reprogramming your mind. If you have always been programmed that every time you say no, someone's going to be like, how dare they, or how can they, like what did I do wrong, kind of a scenario, you will always hesitate to say no. But if you say no, if you practice saying no in professional places, if that is an easy place for you to start, that's the proof that your mind needs to reprogram and that saying no is okay. Like it's not going to hurt anyone to say no. And also the fact that when it comes to personal scenarios, I do something like I started doing this because I always hesitated to say no. What I started to do was I let them know that, hey, I'm working on myself right now. And I want to start by setting some boundaries around me. It's not about you. It's not about anyone else. It's just about me trying to get to a better place. I'm going to say no a couple of times. And I'm just letting you know ahead of time that this is going to happen and this is not on you. Right. And just letting people be aware, especially the people who we are closer to, right? Because those are the people that we are always afraid or often afraid to say no to. Letting them know that this is something that you're going to do ahead of time is a great way to kind of let your people pleaser mind kind of like shh, and also let them know that it's not on them. So yeah, I feel like that was a really good point that Trina raised. Like amazing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. I agree with you. I tend to think that it never occurred to me to let people know that, yeah, I'm working on myself. So bear with me. It might be rocky for us for a little while. I like that so much. Thank you. Jen, you got something to say on this one?
So, yes. And so I totally agree with you about the reprogramming your mind and your body. And just the more that you say no, the more that you're telling yourself that I'm a person who respects myself. I'm a person who respects my boundaries. And all levels of your consciousness are always listening. And so whenever you are saying, I'm going to set this boundary and you follow through with it, your body's like knowing that it's safe to do that and you'll continue to be safe to do that. And then the other thing is really understanding yourself and your patterns. And looking at, okay, so when I'm in this situation, like with my family, this feeling, this pattern pops up, and really looking at that and noticing, okay, so I'm with my family right now, I'm feeling this pattern starting to come up, I'm feeling this need to agree, I'm feeling this need to say yes. And before you even go to like a dinner or be with your family, maybe to say, okay, so what are some things that I can do in this moment? Like if I start getting pushback, if I say no, well, okay, I can leave maybe, or I can do these things and have it prepared ahead of time so that when you're starting to feel the automatic yes, you can be like, wait a minute, I can take a minute. I'm prepared. I have a list of things that I can do instead, of actions I can do instead. And then you're able to take those actions. But it becomes really about understanding you and how you respond in certain situations and where you're coming from. It's just a lot of self-awareness is super, super important.
So that brings us back to your whole concept of it being structural. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was a really good share. Again, everybody's brought such powerful pieces, these little nuggets that when we weave them all together, they just make such a beautiful tapestry for setting boundaries, for saying no. What would you say are the benefits or the positives in becoming a no person, setting those boundaries very clearly for yourself first before you can say no, and then for everybody else? What are the benefits, either to yourself or to them?
Well, the benefits to yourself, kind of what I just touched about before, is that you know in your mind, in your heart, in your soul that you are a person who respects yourself. You are this person. You are a person who, put yourself first. You are a person who takes care of their values. You are a person who is, it's important to them to maybe create a life that they love and to be happy. And these things are super important to them, and they make that a priority. and their actions match up with that. And so it's super important to know that in yourself, rather than having this wishy-washy, you know, sometimes I'll do it, sometimes I won't. So you tell yourself, I'm going to do this, but your subconscious is like, well, half the time you don't do that, so I don't really believe you. You're not that person. And then you struggle with it, right? Because you need to be in complete alignment. So the more that you do it, the more alignment you are. Like, I am this person, and you are it now in this moment. Every time you say no, you are a person who has integrity with yourself and what you want.
So you're
And then it shows other people. Yeah, you're reinforcing it. And then it shows other people what's possible, and that maybe they can also start thinking about what they want, as opposed to just automatically going with whatever everyone else wants. You give them permission to kind of look at their life and say,
and you give yourself permission, and you become a role model.
yes.
Fantastic share. Who'd like to go next? What are the benefits? If Jen hasn't covered them all, and I'm sure there are a few more.
So Jen made some really good points, to be honest, and she spoke about this in the previous answer as well. It's the way that we speak to ourselves after we have set boundaries. Like the way that we speak has always been, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, before we set boundaries, because we are half-assing everything, right? But after setting those boundaries, and there will be, just like fair warning, there is going to be a bit of discomfort when you first start setting boundaries, when you first start saying no, because it goes against everything that you've done so far, right? And you will have a lot of self-hate coming, like, oh, I'm so disgusting to be doing this, who am I to say no to them? A lot of that will happen, right? It is going to happen, because again, it goes against everything that you've ever done, but a little discomfort goes a really long way. And once you start to see the benefits, and those benefits could be more confidence in yourself, more, being able to work in a very in a way that expresses freedom, right? Like, you will express yourself at a very high level in a situation like that. When you see all these benefits like efficiency, freedom, power, control, all the things that you need to be at a high level position, that self-talk will change into, this is good for me, and I'm aware that this is good for me. So I feel like benefits can differ from person to person at the end of the day. And this is something that you need to kind of like work on before you start setting boundaries. Yeah, like, why am I doing this? For who am I doing this? Am I doing this for myself, or am I doing this for others? This is just a way for me to hop on the trendy train that's going on right now, that everyone's setting boundaries, so let me set boundaries. No. Why do you want to set boundaries? Having a clear idea around that, having a clear idea around what you want to benefit from doing an activity like this is a really powerful way to continue through with it. And like, not hesitate and not be like, sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't do it, like Jen was saying. So yeah, I think it's really powerful, and the benefits differ from person to person. Yeah,
that ad was very important as well. Before I get to Trina, we've got a comment from Rita Fillinger Thomas. She says, fabulous discussion. Thank you for this. So ladies, I'm passing on her thanks to you. Rita, I'm so glad you're on this call with us, and please stay as long as you possibly can. Put in any comments or questions, because our panelists will be answering questions in about 15 minutes, we're going to start answering questions. So, Trina, your turn. What do you have to add to this?
For me, one of the benefits of saying no is that I get to jump in puddles. And I'll explain that. Our culture says that there are certain behaviours that are appropriate and inappropriate for certain groups of people to take. And when you're an adult, generally our culture says doing childlike things like jumping in puddles and going on swings is not okay. But actually, there's a little part of me that really likes jumping in puddles. And so I'm saying no to that cultural expectation that I'm going to behave in a certain way. And the benefit of that is that I get to have a little bit more joy in my heart and a little bit more silliness in my day. And that's a really beautiful gift that I can give myself. I also get very muddy pants, but I'm prepared to wear that for the benefit of, that bit of joy. I think when when we're setting boundaries, we often think of what is it that we're keeping out. But I think sometimes we need to think about what are we keeping in as well? What do our boundaries want us to keep in? And for me, you know, jumping in puddles is one of those things that I want to keep in. I want to have that as a part of my life. So I guess the bigger picture thing, if I put it in grown-up words, is that saying no allows us to be authentic and allows us to live in a way that's really true to ourselves. And we sort of talked a little bit about that. It allows us to do the things that really honor ourselves and that make our life joyous.
So sometimes when we say no, we're actually saying yes to ourselves. No to somebody else, really a yes to ourselves.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time when we say no to somebody else, we're allowing ourselves the opportunity to say yes, because when we say yes to somebody else, it fills a space. And when that space is filled, then we can't say yes to ourselves. And, you know, you talked right at the beginning about overwhelm. And the overwhelm is because we're saying yes to so many things. You know, how many times do you hear somebody say, I'm juggling all these things and I've got too many pots on the stove, or whatever, you know, analogy they use? There are so many things going on, and they're not having that boundary to manage the level of expectation that's coming from people. And because of that, there's no time or space for them to say yes to themselves. And that's a really important thing for us to do.
Beautiful. Wow, the answers that are coming up on this panel are fabulous. Okay, so what you're all basically saying is saying no really is about self-care. If you look at it as a big bubble, this saying no to people who ask you to do things that you could do because you've got the expertise, you could do maybe because you have time, you could do because you're just a nice person and can't say no. Here's a scenario. So I know we've all been in this scenario. You're a people pleaser. We've all admitted to that. How, as a people pleaser, do you set boundaries for a coworker who wants to offload a job they don't like doing? You don't like doing it either, but now you're being put in this position. They're not a higher up, they're not a lower down, they're probably in your own strata. So how would you say no to a coworker? This is a specific type of situation that a lot of people who are listening or watching might be in.
I had to practice this a lot in one job I had many years ago, a lot. And I got to the point of just saying, I'm really sorry, I can't help you with that. It's outside the scope of my role and I really need to focus on my tasks at hand. If I was pushed, I would seek support from my manager or try and open up the conversation with the person about what's really going on, what's really the problem here, why is it, you know, really an issue? Because in theory, you know, you shouldn't have more to do in your job than the number of hours that you're working. So why are they trying to push it off? So I might try and help them to unpack that a little bit. But I think the thing that really helped me was being very clear on what my role is, what the organization's expectations of me in my role were, and what I was prepared to accept or not accept. Because I guess I'm just thinking about shiny bauble syndrome, which is a bit of a different thing, but sort of similar. When we keep saying yes, then we end up with so much and we can't do our jobs and we burn ourselves out. So we've sort of talked about that a little bit already. It's figuring out what is the cost of not saying no. And if the cost is having to work till 9 o'clock at night or having to work on a weekend, you know, just thinking about the implications of your inability to say no can be really, really helpful in those situations, I think.
This is the coach speaking. You're actually taking that proactive piece of, so what's really going on here? And I like that you also said, take it higher up if you need to. Speak to your manager. Talk about how we can, what's really going on here? How can we help this person? Okay, Majirima.
Yeah, I love this question a lot because I was in a scenario, I was working in a agency where I never said no to anything that was happening to me in terms of the workload that was being put on me. And it ended up becoming a toxic environment way too quickly for me to be comfortable with it, right? Like I was just overwhelmed with so much work and I still didn't know how to say no. And this is a really good question, but I feel like at that point of time, you really need to see if this is a one time thing or if this happens a lot, right? Because sometimes people do genuinely reach out to you with the fact that I need help on this. So if it is a I need help, can you help me out? I would be happy to help. But if it is something that's just like you do it because I don't want to do it, I'd be like, hey, I love that you're asking me for help and I'm ready to help you out. But right now, this is not working out for me. Saying this is something that doesn't really fit into my scope of work, or saying that I am not an expert on this and it would take me way more time to actually create whatever you're trying to create, or I don't have any idea where you want to go with this project and I would probably take it in a completely different direction. Stating what could happen if I take the job on would be a really good way to say no to someone like this, or just saying like I don't want to do this right now. Like I genuinely am not in a place to be able to work on a project like this. And I just wanted to add, right? Like there is this really wonderful Instagram profile called Lo Haley. Her name is Laura, and she does the scenarios, right? Like your virtual work bestie. She does the scenarios where she sets boundaries in a very beautiful way, right? Shuts down people without having to say a lot of blah 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 blah, all those reasons coming up. So I would genuinely recommend, because I've been enjoying her content because I needed something like that 3 years ago when I was burning out in my toxic work agency. So I definitely recommend you guys to check her out, because she does a lot of these kinds of scenarios on how to set boundaries, how to say no to stuff that you don't really want to do. And I know for a fact that she would be a much better inspiration than me right now when it comes to setting boundaries and saying no to someone, because I'm still recovering from that kind of a tendency to be like, let me help you out, let me do this for you. So yeah, I feel like that would be my answer.
What was her name again? Just out of
It's
curiosity.
it's Laura. I'll just it's LOEWHALEY. That's her Instagram handle, and she does a really good job at
And
setting
she's done it.
boundaries and saying no. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. That was a really good share. All these shares are just blowing me away. Jen, we got you up now.
So this is pretty much a big thing for me, because I've always been, again, with the people pleasing and just the needing to be liked and needing to be seen as capable. I would always try to help people to the best of my ability, and I almost like considered my coworkers like my family, and I want to help them, and I just want to be part of. So I will do anything I can to be part of. But as I'm working through all these things and understanding that it's okay not to be liked as long as I like myself, So I think if I were to go back in this situation now, I think it would still be difficult, but I will be able to process it. I will be able to say, okay, so it's okay if I'm not liked. It's uncomfortable that I'm not liked, maybe because I'm saying no, but it's okay. And coming home and processing those feelings and going through and clearing out the meditation and all that. And then coming back to the work and being like, okay, understanding that like if they're the type of person that's always pushing their work on other people because they don't want to do it, if I say no, they're still going to find someone else. It's not like I'm the only person who can help them. You know what I mean? They're resourceful. If they're always pushing it, they'll go to someone else. And so I have to be, okay, they'll find someone else. I'm not responsible. Like I don't have to be responsible for taking on that stuff. And I don't have to feel bad because they will find someone else to take care of it. But also I think it's just like a one-time thing. If they need my help, it's a one-time thing and I can help them, then I will, you know what I mean? But also I think a way to say it would be like, I'm very busy right now. Let me finish my stuff and then maybe come back to me, in an hour or 2 hours or something like that, if you still need help, and see where I'm at, or I'll come to you when I'm done. And if you still need my help, I think that's actually probably a better way to do it. I'll come to you when I'm done. And so then I work on my
to
stuff.
you. There you
Yeah,
go.
I'll come to you because
when I'm
they'll come
done.
back to me. Yeah. So I think
Exactly.
I'm hoping that's the way I would.
Thank you for sharing that. Rita, one of our watchers, has just made a comment to us. She says, I learned to handle it this way. I'm working on X project for Mr. Boss. You can talk to him or her, and he or she tells me to, and if she or he tells me to stop working on it, so I can do that for you, then I'll be happy to do that. Just let me know what he or she says when you ask him or her. Love that. Love that. So you're taking it back to, yeah, I'd like my boss to know what you're asking me to do. So go ahead and ask them, and then I'll be happy to help you out if he gives me the go ahead or she gives me the go ahead. Brilliant. Thank you, Rita. So glad you jumped in. It's wonderful to have an interactive conversation with our listeners. The last thing we're going to talk about, because we are now in the last 15 minutes of our whole hour, it's gone so fast, crossing boundaries. Putting someone else's wants before your own needs and wants and self-care brings up a lot of emotions for all of us. And those emotions are kind of knee-jerk reactions built on what's happened in our childhood, built on what's happened in our personal lives. So a lot of times when people ask us to do whatever it is they ask us to do for whatever reasons they have, our knee-jerk reaction, which we push down and try so hard to hide, guilt, anger, the feeling of being taken advantage of, the uncomfortableness of saying no, fear. What are your thoughts around these emotions that come up so naturally for us? How can we advise people who might be watching this at another time who aren't on the call with us right now, how to manage those emotions when they just naturally pop in and might color our reactions? Guilt, anger, being taken advantage of, discomfort, fear.
Well, what's interesting is first recognizing that a lot of times we say these are negative feelings and we don't want to feel them. But all feelings are actually positive feelings, because when they were first created, they were created for a purpose. Like anxiety, we probably created because maybe we were 5 and did a presentation and got made fun of. And so now it's like anytime we're in a situation where we might get, made fun of or criticized, the anxiety comes up to protect us. So that's the first thing, is understanding that. And then I think also just understanding that our thoughts create our feelings. So if I'm feeling this way, what am I telling myself? And then really going into what I'm telling myself. And then looking at, okay, so I'm telling myself all this, and then what's the truth? Are these things I'm telling myself true, or are they just perceptions of all these things that are going on? And then also, there's a technique like anchoring, where you can actually train your body to change feelings on demand. And so you can shift your feelings like on demand. If you're feeling something and you don't want to feel that way, you can do a certain movement that you link it up. It's like Pavlov. I don't know if you guys have heard of Pavlov, but I'll make this really quick. He basically did an experiment where he took dogs and he would ring a bell and feed the dogs and ring a bell and feed the dogs. And he did this over and over and over again. And what he realized was when he would start ringing the bell, without even putting food down, the dogs would salivate, because they neurologically linked up the sound of the bell with food and getting fed. And so the body's reacted. So we can do that. We can create a physiological response with the movement, and that we can call that movement, that feeling on demand. And it's an NLP technique, which is really cool. And so there are things that we can do to shift our feelings in the moment. So it's a lot of understanding, what am I telling myself? How do I want to feel? And then moving towards what you want to feel, what you want, and where you're going.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant share. Thank you, Jen. That's so valuable. So very valuable. We'd like to jump in with the next piece.
I feel like I'd like to go. That was a beautiful point that you raised, Jen. And, this is something that I learned during coaching. Was a lot of times when we are coaching people, there might be instances when we are triggered by the story that they are saying. And so we were taught, like my coaches told me, that at a scenario like this, take a deep breath and be like, this is something that is coming up for me. I appreciate you for showing up right now. And I would like to work on this together with you at a later point of the day. we will go through these emotions. And at that point of time, it's basically like talking to your inner child and being like, I'm not ignoring you. A lot of times that is our reaction, right? When we have all this guilt and anger and all these emotions come up, our reaction is, let's ignore it so that it disappears. But it won't disappear, it will just shout louder and louder and louder. So at a time like that, if you are in conversation with someone and all these things are coming up because they are crossing the boundaries, they are crossing the lines that you have very clearly drawn and told them about repeatedly, in a scenario like that, you let your inner child know, we'll have a conversation, we will move through this guilt, we'll move through all the emotions that are coming up for us at a later point of the day. Right now, I would like to be in a state, much like Jen was saying, I'd like to be in a state where I have a clearer mind so that I can once again reinforce the boundaries that I have put, right? Because when guilt and anger and all this comes up, we have this somatic experience of our body trembling, tears falling down our eyes, our voice shaking, and it shows and it makes us feel that we are not being strong enough in setting our boundaries. And immediately we try to retract ourselves in, be like, maybe this is not a boundary that's working for me. And we have all this, again, negative self-talk that comes up in a scenario like that. So letting yourself know that let's work on this at a later point of time. Today, 8 o'clock, wine time, right? Like, we'll have a glass of wine and we'll have a conversation. we'll move through this together. It's a really good way for that particular moment. And also, when you are going through it, I feel like communication is a very big thing when it comes to setting boundaries or anything in reality. We have this saying, communication is key for every relationship. It includes the relationship that we have with ourselves. And so communicating your boundaries, understanding why you're doing something, and talking about that at, let's say, 8 p.m. wine time, right? At that point of time, you can ask yourself, why is all these things coming up? Does this mean that you still have something unhealed, something that you haven't worked on, something that you thought would have disappeared with time but it still exists? That you need to work on it, right? Like, we have this saying, right? Our body remembers what our mind forgets. And sometimes our body remembers things from way back into our childhood, when we would be like, when we felt like our boundaries as a child were subconsciously violated, and we didn't have the voice, we didn't have the power, or we weren't seen strong enough to be considered. Our opinion didn't seem valuable enough at a point like that because we were still kids. All of that might come up. So having that communication with ourselves and taking a deeper dive as to where all these emotions are coming from and solving them also is like really huge when it comes to setting boundaries and maintaining those boundaries over a long period of time. So yeah.
If we take Jen's advice and your advice, we just need the last piece of the puzzle from you, Dr. Trina.
I was just sitting here thinking the horrible thing about going last on this panel is that they've said everything that needs to be said. So I probably will touch just a little bit on a couple of things that have been said already. What came into my mind when you initially mentioned the crossing boundaries and the emotions and the reactions, Sue, was a quote by Viktor Frankl that I probably won't get exactly right, but it's something to the effect of, between the catalyst and the response, there's a space. And that space offers us, and that's the quote, now the rest is just me talking now, that space offers us an opportunity to choose how we will respond. And one of the ways that we can respond, if we're in a situation where we've been triggered and we've got a lot of strong emotions coming up, one of the ways we can respond is to ask for some space and some time out, to actually say to the person, I really need to think about this. You don't have to, depending on the situation, you might want to not want to say, I'm triggered and I'm feeling really emotional. You might just want to say, I just need a little bit of space and time to think about this and think how it might sit with the other commitments that I have. One of my mentors a long time ago had a great line, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to have a look at my calendar and I'll come back to you in 2 days. That was her standard response when she was offered an opportunity or being required to do something that she might not want to do. So I think that's the first thing for me, is there's that space and there's that response that we can use. And this sort of picks up a little bit on what Madarima was talking about. The emotions that we feel We feel them because they're giving us messages. So the message of fear is that we're not safe. The message of anger is that our boundaries have been crossed. So if we can take some time out of the situation, maybe have a conversation with our inner child or have a bit of a look at our emotions, we can look at what is the emotion here that we're feeling. If it's fear, what is it that I'm afraid of? And is that fear real? Because as Madarima said, sometimes the fear is a bit of a hangover from childhood or from an earlier experience where we were traumatized in some way, and it may not apply in this situation. So having that space to examine the emotion and the opportunity to think about, well, what's the emotion telling me? Is it valid in this situation? And if it is, what is it I'm really afraid of? Am I afraid of not being loved, of losing my job, whatever it is? And then, there's a whole path that we can go down to examine that. But that's just the beginning of providing a little bit of support into a situation where you're very emotional.
My goodness, this conversation has been so rich. It's gone through so many different levels and textures. And it's really I believe it's spoken to what a lot of people need to hear. So I'd like to thank Dr. Trina, Madarima, and Jen for being on this panel. And now it's time to turn this over to Sophia, who is our host from Sacred You.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much. And thank you, if I can just say thank you for stepping in, because like we said, our facilitator wasn't able to make it tonight, or tonight here in Australia. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for Jen coming back, and Maddie and Trina. It's great to meet Trina and Maddie. I'd love to chat with you more, so please come again. Just want to thank you. It has been a wonderful conversation. I've been really, really enjoying it. I've been watching. We've had quite a few people online, including Rita and quite a few others. But Rita's been engaging in the conversation, which is wonderful. Just want to let everyone know a little bit about our sacred community, that we connect. We love offering a platform where you can connect with like-minded, heart-centered people, women and men, all over the world. And at the moment we've got over 30 special interest tribes. Hopefully we'll be having a few more sometime soon, but over 30 special interest tribes that you can join just for $1, $1 Australian, which is, I know it's even less in America. And you can try it all out for 21 days just for $1. Then after that, it's just 15 Australian dollars a month. So click on the links in the comments. I've been putting all the links for all these wonderful guests, including Sue and Jen, and everyone's links in all the comments everywhere. If you want to connect with anyone, please, click on the links there and connect with them directly. Also, much more information about our upcoming events. Tomorrow night here in Australia time at 6 p.m. Australia time, our next panel discussion is Healing the Natural Way. And then after that, Thursday morning at 10:30 is Financial Wellbeing. Sue will be back to join us as a facilitator on the 8th of July at 10 a.m. our time, or the 7th at your time, Sue, for what controls your peace or panic every day. Love that topic. Really looking forward to it. Looking forward to all our upcoming panelists, and thank you. And thank you everyone again for joining us. Thank you.